Okay. Where's that notebook? All right. So my first question is, why did your parents come over from Italy? Like, what caused them to come over?
Well, my dad came over in right before World War I, and he came over to check on his father, who worked in the coal mines, and he found out that his dad got killed in the coal mines in Twin Rocks, Pennsylvania. So he, instead of going into the coal mines, decided that he would join the U.S. Army during World War II, World War I, I'm sorry. And which was very, very smart thing to do. He didn't know the language, he didn't know, whatever was going to happen to him. And that's why, that's how we settled here in the Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania.
Okay, so what was it like growing up with 11 brothers and sisters, and what was it like being the oldest?
Well, there was a lot of responsibility. When I was probably a sophomore, freshman or sophomore, a farmer asked me to help him on the farm. And he was a very nice gentleman. And I worked for him for, I don't know, from the time I was a freshman in high school, maybe even 8th grader, I really don't remember. I used to walk from Vittendale to his farm, way on top of Rex's Hill. His name was John Duncan, and I worked for him for 3 or 4 years. He would, I used to walk the whole distance from the last house on Plank Road, or when we moved to Chicory Hill, from Chicory Hill to his farm, which must have been close to 5 miles. I used to walk that every day and work on the farm, and would have one meal with his sister. His sister was an old maid, and I don't mean it in a derogatory fashion. She never got married, but boy could she cook. She would cook us one meal a day, and I'm telling you, the meals were beautiful. And when the day come over, when we worked 10 hours a day, he would take us home in his car anyway, and we got 50 cents a day for 10 hours. That's a nickel an hour, right?
Yeah. There was a lot back then.
That's no, yeah, there was. I mean, for a guy going on, what else could he do? You know what I'm saying? But I never held that money against him, because he was a real gentleman, and his sister was also a very nice lady.
Cool. So, do you have what memories stand out of when you think back to the old house up on Chicory? Like, what do you think of back when you were living there?
Well, I don't. When we moved to Chicory from Plank Road in Vittendale, my mother somehow.
1 second, so yeah, we'll wait for that. Let me just cut it. And we're on. Okay, so the question was like memories about the old house.
Oh, well, right. When my mother somehow found out that there was a house for sale just outside of Vittendale on Chicory Hill that was up for taxes, and my father had just gotten his World War I, what was it, a pension, or they gave him so much money for serving in the service for all them years during the war. And she was lucky enough to get the house for taxes. And again, that we were very fortunate to do that, and we all enjoyed living up on Chicory Hill.
It's still there to this day too. It's
Well, we're not there to,
no, but the house is there. That is still standing.
Oh yes, yeah, the house. When my dad died, he willed the house to my two youngest siblings. Not my youngest siblings, but his. Paul and Patty were willed the house.
And okay, so did they just end up selling the house off? Is that what they did?
They did sell the house. I think it was to a Lutzko family. And they used to live in Vittendale, where the parents had 22 children. And I don't know whether they just felt sorry and kind of sold the house to them, you know, more or less to please them. Really, I don't think they made any much money on it, you know.
22 kids, that's crazy. That's so
Yeah.
many. Double the 11 you guys had. That's yeah. Okay. So what was it like to grow up in Vittendale?
You know, I had no problem making friends wherever we went. When I lived on 6th Street in Vittendale, I went to school there for the first 3 years, from 1st to 3rd grade. And then we moved to Culver, Pennsylvania, and my dad worked there for not even a year, 9 months I think it was, and he didn't like it very much, so he returned to Vittendale. And actually, you know, I couldn't speak the English language until probably the 4th grade that I was in, and that's where I spent my first year in Culver. And my grades were very, very bad. My first 2 years in Vittendale, somehow the teachers understood that I couldn't speak English, and they passed me every year. I don't know whether it was because they seen something in the future that I maybe would pick up and pick up the language and be a good student or what. But when I went to Culver, boy, they gave me bad marks all the way through. And if they made a red mark, it was even worse, you know. I don't know whether my parents picked up on that or what, but they said, we're going to move back to Vittendale. And you know, even though my grades were so bad in Culver, the teachers in Vittendale passed me on to 5th grade.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something. So so during that time, what was it like with all the activity and the mines going on around town? What was it like with like the trucks going by and all that?
You know, Vittendale was a very, very much a company town. Very much a company town. Run by a strict police force. But they had their job to do, and they did it. You know what I'm saying? They would even meet people at the railroad station. Where are you going? Now, we don't want you to be talking about unions, you know? Where are you going? They would take you to the house that you said you were going to. You had no freedom, you know, and you were a slave to the company. But
did the law enforcement just like
Oh,
they just they implemented all the company rule, like they were?
oh yeah, and they had the horses, you know, and they had the guns. And when you see that, that's authority, right? You do what you're told. If you don't, you're kicked out of town. And they came and took the furniture out of your house, and you were responsible for moving it to where you were going to go, where you were going to move, which was too one-sided, you know, too one-sided.
That's something you don't hear about that. It's crazy, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, what was it like working inside the mine, especially with your dad? What was it like
I
working with
enjoyed
him?
it. My dad was, well, you know, he lost his dad. Like I said, he lost his dad in the mines. And the first thing he ever told me, don't worry about loading the coal. You worry about your life first. Make it safe for you to get the coal out. And then from there on in, everything will take care of itself. Even though at the beginning they were not paying crap to the miners, you know, until the union was formed. And then things picked up.
Okay, so that's so. What do you have? What was it like working in the mines? What was the conditions
Hard.
like? Yeah.
Very hard. You walk around in your knees most of the day in the mine, shoveling coal into the coal cars that you get paid for. And they paid us, I think it was 97 cents a ton to get the coal into the cars on the railroad. 97 cents. My dad and I, we did real well. We were in a section of the mine where the roof wasn't too bad, and we used to bail out about 16 cars a day. Now, I could have put checks on 8 of them cars, you know, but I said, why should I do that? I'll let my dad put 12 or 14 checks on them 16 cars, because he had a big family and he'd never have to pay taxes. And then I had enough for my life, you know. But that's the way it was.
So what was it like around the house? Like I mean I know your mom died young, so
My mother was a very, very hard worker. She taught me everything that I know about gardening. And my dad taught me everything about the coal mines. We had, up on Plank Road, we had 2 gardens. I was just a kid, like I told you, and I was the oldest of the family, and I was probably, even before my 14th birthday, we would make, in the garden, my mother would show me how to plant, how to harvest, and how to really make the gardens worthwhile, you know. My mother was a very, very hard-working woman. There was nobody else I loved more in my life than my mother.
around the house when she did pass, what was it like in the house? Did everyone step up?
In the house, in the house itself, she did all the cooking.
I mean after she passed away, what was it like for the kids and the family?
man.
Yeah.
It was really, really a different life, you know. My mother was well loved by all of us children. And like I told you, did all the baking, cooking, cleaning, until we started to grow up, and then we had certain chores to do. During the summer, like I told you, I would work in the farms, but I had other chores to do. I had to get the firewood to start all the fires in the stoves during the winter. And I had to, and there was certain stuff that my dad wanted. He didn't like certain woods, you know. And we, like, when he built a fence around the yard, he would tell me to get the limbs, and he wanted the locust post. He didn't want no, because the locust posts in the ground last longer than most tree posts, you know. And the limbs the same way. But he said you didn't have to get them real straight to get them. But he built a whole fence around the whole area out there, and I would have to feed the rabbits, take care of the chickens, and I'd help him milk the goats we had. But he did most of the work, and not me. Believe me, he was some guy. He'd milk the cow, and even come over and help me milk the goats too, you know. My dad was a hell of a hard-working man, same as my mother was.
I think it runs in the family.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
So okay, so I guess once the coal stopped coming out of the mountain, what was it? Were you around when the mine started being shut down?
Well, let me tell you what happened. On June the 5th of 1959, I went to work in the coal mines for my last day. We went into a section that had a real bad roof. It was a slate roof, and I was running what they called, I run a BU-14 joy loader. And the buggy boy come in, and I told him, we can't load you because the roof is bad here. Would you go out and get me 2 crossbars? We wanted bars to put up to make the roof safe. So he said, okay. He went back out, and he said, the crossbars are way on the end of the trip, and it'll take a while before they get down here where we can load them into the buggy. Would you try to load me up for one load to take out? And I said, well, okay, we'll try it. I no sooner started the machine up to do it. The joy loaders has 2 big arms on them, you know. And I put the switch on and started running it, and the goddamn roof started to fall down. And you know the first thing that came into my mind when that was happening? I says, this is going to be the end of me. I'm not good. Joe, my youngest son Joe, had just been born on the last of March. And there, he was only a little bit over 2 months old. And I says, Jesus, I ain't gonna see my family grow up. And I got covered up, the all came down, and it pushed me against the joy loader. And the joy loader on these arms that took the coal in, had big spikes sticking up, you know. And when my leg come down, it hit one of these spikes, I had shut the machine off so it wouldn't run, which was good. When I hit that, the spike went into my leg. And of course the weight of the rock made the gash that much longer, you know. And like I told you, I was worried about, not worried, I was just thinking, I'm not going to see my family and grow up. And, it was the only thing that was worried about me. But we had one of these lights on our miners' hats, and I knew that not too far down the road there was my, what they call the cutter and scraper. And I flagged, I kept shaking my head, and they knew when you do that, you're in danger, you know. So they came up and see what was happening, and they broke this rock that had fallen on me. And then they called the boss, and eventually when they came in, I wish I would have brought the papers that I had lost quite a bit of blood, you know. But anyhow, they took me out, rushed me to the hospital in Johnstown, and that was about it. My leg, when they took me to the doctors in the hospital, they had over 300 stitches inside my leg that they sewed together, and I think that's one of the problems that I have with my legs today.
From that mining accident?
Yeah.
Did you ever return to the mine again?
Never returned to the mine again. When, let's see, the accident happened on June the 5th of 1959. In August, I had recuperated. June, July, and the end of August, I had recuperated almost 3 months, and I was getting ready to go back into the coal mines, and they shut the mine down. It was the best thing that ever happened in my life. And in the following, I signed up for unemployment compensation during the winter. In the spring, I went to New York, got a job working on the farm for $1.25 an hour. I used to work for the farmer for 60 hours a week, and on Saturday he would pay me. I would get $75.
1 second. So you would say that's $75 again?
$75 a week for 60 hours of work, $1.25 an hour.
That's crazy.
And then I would drive home to Pennsylvania, and the next day, just to see my family, come back and start all over on Monday morning.
So you would drive back here on the weekends from upstate New York?
Yeah, just to spend a couple hours with my family and then drive back.
How long were you in New York and they were here before they moved up to New York?
How long was I what?
How long were you in New York and they were in Pennsylvania before they finally moved up to New York with you?
Well, we moved up, I think it was 19, when I finally got a job with the paper mill up and they paid me way below the union wages in the coal mines. In the mines I was making, I forget how much, but when I went to work in the paper mill in Lockport, New York, I worked for $1.96 an hour. $1.96 an hour in 1961 or something like that. I kept putting my application to go to General Motors at Harrison's, and they never called me. In '65, I went to the General Motors office, and the girl met me, the secretary met me, and she said, "What do you want?" I says, "I'd like to speak to the chief executive officer." She says, "Well, he's very important and a very busy man." I says, "I've got all day, I don't care, I'll wait." It wasn't even 5 minutes. She came back and she said, he'll speak to you. So I went in and I explained the situation. And I told him that I had been putting my application in here for I don't know how many years. And I said, "You haven't called me." And I said, "I know there are people working now that put their applications in and are working." I said, "Is there some kind of a discrimination here?" Of my age, I was probably around 40 years old at the time, something like that. And he said, I said, "Well, maybe I should see the labor board and see what's going on here, you know?" And he said, "Oh, don't do that." He said, "Go home and take it easy and we'll see what we can do." It wasn't a couple of days later, they said, "Come on over, get take your physical." So that's what I did, and that's how I got in. And then I worked there for 20 years and retired.
Wow.
If I wouldn't have challenged him a little bit, I might have been still waiting, you know. This way, I went to work for General Motors. I got 20 years in, and I retired. And you know, I have no bitches in life. Me and my wife, we raised 3 children. We've got a little bit of bank account, and we're satisfied. When you're satisfied, and my children are the same way. We used to go camping together, have a lot of fun together. That's memories, you know, and they all enjoyed that. And I know now that they all done real well, which is what the main thing for me. They're all doing real well.
And you got to watch them grow up.
Well,
yeah, that's great though.
yeah.
So, okay, so was your? I mean, I know. I mean, most of your brothers and sisters left the town. So, was your dad pretty instrumental in pushing people to go out on their own?
No,
No.
he would. They weren't pushy people. When we became of age, we all knew that, you know, we had to get out on our own. And most of us realized that. In fact, my sister Ida, the one they celebrated today, I don't know why, she was much better in school than I was. She had the English language down pat, where I didn't pick it up for 3 or 4 years. We were in an Italian neighborhood, and everybody spoke Italian, and that's what I picked up. But she picked up the English language, and she did real well. And a couple of years before I graduated from high school, she decided she was going to go to New York and on her own. And she found a job. Now this is the facts that I got. She worked for a Jewish family, and they paid her room and board plus 50 cents a day to be their servant. But she stuck it out for a little while, you know, until she met her husband, Melvin, Joey's father and mother. Father, rather. And that's the way it was, you know.
Yeah. All right, so finally going to move into the reunion now. So I want to just talk about the history of the reunion. Like what started it? Like what started the reunion? What was the reason for bringing you all back together?
I really don't know what started it, but I think the pushing point was when we went the last time to see our dad, and then he died, and we didn't know what the hell to do, so we all got to writing, between writings and telephone calls, we decided that we'd have a family reunion every year in Vittendale, and that's what got it started.
It's been going a long time now, huh?
Yeah, it has, since the 70s, so yeah,
Okay, so
that's great.
yeah, definitely. So what are your memories? Like, what are some of your like fondest memories of the reunions over the years?
Well, I don't know if I have any fondest, but I do tell you this. I will tell you this. It's just once a year. When you see your brothers and sisters and their young children, everybody's growing up, you better figure, well, we're going to keep doing this. You know? That's the nicest thing in the world.
So now the flood in the 70s. Were you around for the flood in the 70s?
I sure
So
will.
can you tell me a bit, like, just tell me your memories. What happened that day? That few days.
Well, I couldn't tell you really the specifics, but I know the creeks were overflowing, and they called it the Johnstown flood, I think it was. They called it, but Vittendale, our creeks really did overflow, and they were really washing out everything, you know, and. But no, I don't really have any specific, because we were up in 1970, we were up in New York already, you know. Everything was hunky-dory, I guess that you would say.
Okay, so so the reunion. What makes Vittendale such a special place?
What makes it Vittendale a special place? Probably growing up and your neighbors, everybody, you know, most of us were, not us, but most of our parents were immigrants from either Italy, Russia, Serbia, Hungarians, people, and you were very poor, very, very poor. And just like Mrs. Whitey's mother, my best friend in this world, my Whitey Hegedish, he was my best friend. His mother was a Hungarian and his father was a Hungarian. And she used to tell me stories about seeing my mother on that big stone in Vittendale, sewing, and she said she was such a beautiful, beautiful young bride, you know. And everybody got along with everybody. Of course, it didn't say that everybody did that. There was always somebody that, you know, was a craphead. And I remember when living on 6th Street, somebody got killed on the street. Somebody in the neighborhood killed them, you know. But I was just a kid, like I said. I only spent about 3 years in Vittendale on the 6th Street when I was a kid. And then when we moved back, we moved to the last house in Plank Road. But then there again too, we ran into an Italian neighborhood. The Biondos, the Bianucci's, the Castles, and our next door neighbors was a Miller family who I don't know where the family came from, but it was just Mr. Miller and Mrs. Miller, and they had a boarder who boarded with them. And he was a World War I veteran, just like my dad was, you know. We got along with everybody, you know.
In a real close community.
Oh yeah, yeah. Especially, and when you live in an Italian neighborhood, see, the Italian language was with me again. You know, like I said, it was really tough. I remember some of the girls not too long ago. I used to come, our neighbors here in Vittendale. She was one of my teachers. Her name was Lynette Daly, and she had a sister that graduated with me in 1941. And when I used to come here, or in the first of the reunions, she used to tell me, she used to go home and tell her parents about some Italian guy that just came from Italy and he can't speak the Italian language, you know. Yeah. But Lynette Daly, if it wasn't for her, I don't think I would have graduated high school. She was the English teacher in my senior year, and she decided that she was going to have us make a play, and she wanted me to be right up there, you know, because if I couldn't do it,